By far, the best news that came out of QuakeCon 2023 was that Quake II had been remastered and is releasing. It was like a shadow drop. It's one of those, and it's releasing right now. So what you're taking a look at is my gameplay of a little bit, first 15 minutes or so of the Quake II campaign. This game is packed full of awesome goodness, just out of the box, without anything in it. I love Quake. It's one of my absolute favorite first-person shooter series of all time. I will post a link in one of the cards or somewhere on this video if you want to go back and look at my other Quake content for the amount of content that I got out of the original Quake package. Quake 2 continues to deliver on a lot of that stuff, and this is the first time it's been available on modern consoles outside of the Nintendo 64. So a lot of my friends who are in the console space can finally see what made this game so freaking amazing back then. And it's still amazing now. There are definitely some limitations. It is incredibly dated in terms of its graphics, but gameplay to me is still absolute top notch. And I think Quake remains the gold standard for what a good first-person shooter should be. So what do you get in this package? Well, if you got it on Game Pass, go download it now and quit watching this video. But for everybody else who's maybe on the fence and doesn't know if they like it or not, this is actually a really, really cool edition of this game because they've added some new stuff that has never before been seen or played, which makes it even more exciting. And as a side note, the competitive multiplayer scene has seemingly popped out of nowhere. And there are so many people checking this out right now. So let's talk about what this is. Well, Quake 2 is a much more narrative-focused game than the original Quake. You play as a Marine known as Bitterman, and he is sent with a ton of other Marines, as you're watching in the cutscene here, to go invade this evil alien planet, to take the offensive, as you saw maybe a little bit in the cutscene. They were attacking us, and now it's our turn to go back and finish the fight. And, of course, Bitterman gets hit. His ship goes down significantly farther away from the rest of his team, and armed with his trusty little blaster, he's going to be a good Marine and go pretty much single-handedly destroy this alien race and everything about it. And that's fine. But they did a lot of really good narrative design here, something that was missing in the original Quake. There's much more of a cohesive story that makes sense. There's actually objectives and missions that kind of paint a picture of how you're kind of working your way through this particular campaign. Back in Quake 1, it was basically just go kill stuff. There wasn't really much of a rhyme or reason to why you're doing it. They did try to tighten that up a little bit in some of the DLC, but in the core game experience, at least, there wasn't much to it. And that was fine. It was just mindless shooting fun, and that was great. Fighting against demonic demons and weird mutations and that sort of thing, and that was fine. Here you have a much more human element to it. A lot of the enemies you fight early on are very human looking, very human reacting, and it gives a different vibe to this game. So the biggest thing I would say out of any of these releases is that if you have a 120 hertz television and you're playing this on modern series consoles, you can play this game at 120 FPS, which realistically, now you're looking at the graphics, right? You're like, yeah, like my calculator could play this at 120 FPS. A lot of games were always kind of limited by frames, and there's always been a issue with a lot of games not running very well when they run too fast. And one of the things I can say really about, I was going to say all Bethesda games, but Skyrim comes to mind here. One of the things I could say that's really true about this game in particular is that it runs even better, faster. It's incredibly fluid, snappy gameplay, and the more you run and gun, the more of a badass you feel like. So that's actually not a bad thing. So you're going to get the 120 FPS. They did up-res it to 4K. It probably doesn't look like it from this image here. This isn't a complete rebuild with new assets. They are still using the original assets. And unfortunately, the ray tracing module that they debuted a few years ago doesn't seem to be included in this current build. I suspect they'll add it later. At least I hope they will. but you'll notice that it's a little bit light on the lighting. Yes, you still get that effect of when you're shooting. You can see the kind of light particles coming off your blaster, but I don't think it's the true ray tracing that we saw in the Quake II RTX update a couple of years ago on Steam. But despite that, it's got everything and it runs super, super, super well. The package includes the original Quake II campaign, both original DLC. Back then they called them mission packs. So it was Reckoning and Ground Zero. It also includes the Nintendo 64 iteration of Quake 2, known as Quake 2 64. And they've added, just like they did before, Machine Gun Games has gone back and added a new 28 level campaign called Call of the Machine. So when I played through the original Quake and I played through all those DLCs and reviewed all of them, I'm going to do the same thing here because I just love this series so much. But I really enjoyed the Machine Gun Games new content. It was incredibly difficult. It was definitely for people who are masters at the game. Lots of platforming, lots of puzzle solving, which for Quake doesn't really mean a whole lot, but it was very tricky. And based on the enhancements that Quake 2 has, I can only imagine, I'm going to play through the original campaign first and the DLCs. I'll work my way up to that, but I'm really excited to see what they do with that content because I bet it's going to be awesome. They've also added, some new dynamic shadow stuff, some improved lighting, new glow maps. Play local, split screen, and online across 4 different multiplayer modes, including co-op, deathmatch, team deathmatch, and capture the flag. They've added AI opponents to deathmatch and team deathmatch mode. They've also added this thing called the id Vault, which includes basically a lot of developer images and stuff and assets from everything that they've developed. So they really opened up kind of like an art book, essentially, of all the different assets and everything that are included as well there, which is really, really cool. They also have a couple other new things I wanted to mention. They've added a compass, which this game does rely heavily on item utilization. That's something that the original Quake didn't. So in the original Quake, if you walked over the quad damage item on the ground, you instantly used quad damage. It was on. And if you picked up, that you would have to kind of be smart when you picked it up because it only lasts 30 seconds to a minute or whatever. So you might want to clear part of the enemy because it's a difficult part at the end where enemies are going to spawn and you want to have the quad damage and just burn them down. Particularly when they added in that horde kind of survival mode at the end of Quake. They launched that not too long ago. And yes, that's also in my playlist, so go check out my thoughts on that. But when they added that, for example, there'd be a quad damage item in the middle, but it was up to you to walk over it when you wanted to activate it. So they've changed that, and it's more like a traditional shooter. Again, keep in mind when this game came out, everybody. But they added an inventory system, so you can quickly open up pieces of your inventory. So collecting quad damage or rebreathers or other items in the game, you could choose when you want to use them. A lot of times it's designed that it's meant to be used kind of in that area, like, oh, here's a quad damage and now there's 40 enemies coming around the corner. But if you're smart about how you utilize grenades or explosives, then maybe you could save it for later, particularly a tough boss or some of the other challenges that approach, which I really like. But a new piece of inventory that has been added is the compass. So the compass now allows you to basically navigate the world wherever you are. I don't think these games are particularly labyrinthian. They are definitely designed to loop around and reward exploration by finding secrets and enemies and ammo caches and weapons and stuff like that. So it is easy to get kind of off the beaten path, so to speak, and just start going off on a random direction and where am I supposed to go? Not that the levels are super massive. It's not open world where you're going to be lost for hours and hours. But, you may find yourself in a situation where you get just kind of stuck in a loop and you don't know where to go. Well, the compass is going to allow you to basically navigate you just following the green checkers on the ground right back to where you need to go, which is great. And I think that's a nice accessibility thing for people who are probably new to this game and maybe struggling a little bit. So, and if you don't want it, don't use it. It's just part of your inventory. It's there if you want it. If not, don't. It doesn't really matter. And that's really, really cool as well. The other cool functionality they've added is a lot of modern elements, but back then this was a PC only game, but now you have crossplay, which is cool because it's going to keep the very small community tight, at least in the sense that whether you're on PlayStation, Nintendo Switch, or Xbox, or PC, everybody's going to be dropped in the same lobby to play together, which is great. They've also added in, some of the cooperative modes, which I've never gotten to play this cooperative, by the way. It seems like it only currently supports couch co-op, which is a little disappointing because I wanted to play with my buddy Wes last night, and we could not figure out how to play online together. But they now have, this cooperative gameplay element. There's a compass. They now have this cooperative gameplay element that will basically make it a little different. Now, it did offer co-op before, by the way, but you can now respawn teammates if you reach certain checkpoints in the game, and teammates now spawn close to you instead of back at the beginning of the level. You can also ping areas using different gestures in the game. So there's some coolness there. And again, it's limited based on the system, I understand. But let's face it, everything's better with friends, right? So really, really excited for that. And as with the original Quake, the Quake II offers a slew of accessibility features. Read out loud chat, transcribe chat, speak for me, high contrast, the amount of screen flashing, and you can obviously change the difficulty and add in console commands to do all sorts of crazy things. So it's accessible to anybody. But if you haven't yet played this game, if you haven't gotten the joy of going through this, do yourself a favor and check it out. It's $10. You can get it on practically any game service and really enjoy it. And it's just so fun looking at the lineage of this series. And it's so fun looking at how it has evolved over the years. When this game came out, things like weapons bloom and bobbing and that sort of thing didn't really exist. The fact that enemies had different kill animations when they died, sometimes they'd be down but not out, essentially, like laying on their back and still shooting at you. Some of the voiceover work and the environmental changes, flipping a lever in a room filled with water, or activating different levers or secret doors, that wasn't necessarily a huge thing back then. So this was groundbreaking in a lot of different ways. It does take away some of the spooky horror elements that were found in the original Quake, that very dark gothic feel, which personally I enjoy that aesthetic better. I still like the original Quake better than Quake II. That said, this is a phenomenal, upgrade to the series and a very different game in a very radical direction in terms of what the original game was. Now you can see your character's hands holding the weapon, the bob, the jumping, all that sort of thing is in there, and that didn't exist back then. So yes, I'm sure by today's standards, by modern Call of Duty standards, whatever, this game probably looks incredibly dated to many. But if you're like me and you grew up on this kind of stuff, this is an awesome trip down memory lane, and it looks better than it ever has before. So that's all my thoughts on this game. Expect in the next couple of weeks from me some content on just playing through and my reviews on all the different mission packs, and maybe some multiplayer. I hope they had a horde mode. We'll have to wait and see. But for now, my journey has come to an end. I want to thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this content. There's definitely more to come. And until next time, I will see you guys on the other side. Take care.